Attention, please. Eastern Airlines Flight 19, now ready for departure.
Welcome aboard the Walt Disney World Express monorail. Now, ladies and gentlemen, we're entering the vacation kingdom of the world.
There's enough land here to hold all the ideas and plans we could possibly imagine. We call it Epcot. Will be our experimental prototype city of Tomorrowland.
Welcome to another episode of the Retro Disney World Podcast, taking you back to the vacation kingdom of the world, the way it was, and the way it is in your memories.
All right, welcome to another episode of the Retro Disney World Podcast, the official podcast of the Lake Buena Vista Historical Society. This is episode 51, Horizons Part 3, The Legacy. We'll be wrapping up all of our Horizons coverage. All right, and sitting in with me always tonight from Tampa, Florida, Mr. Hal Bowers. How you doing tonight?
Aloha, I'm doing just wonderful, ready to dive in here and get this done for the folks.
That's right. They asked for it, they're getting it full swing here. And Ohio, Mr. JT Kuzier.
Good evening, Todd. How you doing?
Pretty good. Nice and warm.
Oh, it's been hot. It's something else here, but yeah, we're plugging right along, getting ready for a trip to Florida, which is
That's right.
Exactly what we need on these hot days, just more heat.
You're meeting up with some of our fans. JT is going on a promotional tour to to promote Retro Magic, which we'll talk about a little later in the show here.
Meeting up with the World of Micah on YouTube and the Fort Wilderness podcast. Our friends Art and our favorite fan Reese is going to be there. We're going to go explore some Fort Wilderness railroads, so we'll be meeting up doing that.
Hope you bring back some iron for us to sample.
Right,
so,
got the golf cart lined up. Yeah, it's going to be
all
legit.
Set.
Yes.
Awesome. And also coming to us just south of us, but east of Ohio, Mr. Brian P. Miles. How you doing tonight, Brian?
Greetings and salutations from Philadelphia, the Liberty City. And happy birthday, Todd.
Thank you, sir. Yeah, this is how I spend my evening birthday with you guys. So, had cake and a full day of work, so we're ready to roll. So,
Brian, I was expecting a Happy Birthday America from Philadelphia.
Well, it's already passed.
Yeah,
I mean, that would have been like the June
belated
one.
birthday.
Independence Day was last week.
Yep.
It's always a joyous time here in the tri-state area. We celebrate it just like George Washington did, setting off fireworks and having barbecues and
taking an airport.
Now, Brian, there's nothing here, Brian, between Independence Day and really Labor Day. I think we should reserve a day in August for that tri-state area to have something like Pork Roll Day.
Pork Roll Day would be nice.
Wouldn't that be nice?
I have a package in the fridge. I haven't opened it yet.
There we go.
Picked it up last week.
If you guys could take that down to Roy's cabin and fry it up, then we'll have something.
Here's a question. Is it a Florida thing? Like, can I get it when I go to my grocery run?
Absolutely. I am told you can get it in the Publix markets down there. They have pork roll for sale.
I might hit this up because I looked here. It's not.
Dude, yeah, you're going to have breakfast with Reese and everybody. Go out to Fort Wilderness, get a barbecue going. Fry
I'm not having breakfast with Reese.
Yeah, English muffins with a little cheese. Oh, it's good stuff.
Oh, yeah, a little egg. Fry up an egg. Turn it over hard.
Yep.
Yeah, I'll put it in my mouth like a chest of drawers. That's for sure.
We've got them all down
check,
here.
Check.
You're done for this night. Good night, everybody. All right, we do have another guest sitting in with us tonight. Ted Linhart is back with us. He was here in the Horizons Part 1, The Promise. And Ted, welcome back to the show. I know you've got some notes for the Legacy portion, so thanks for joining us again.
Thank you for having me. It's very exciting, and I loved listening to part 2 as just a listener. It was great.
Was it too long?
No. I could have, I could have done 2 more. I could listen 2 more hours for that.
My son picked up on it, and he says to me, so can we listen to your latest episode? And then we were driving home somewhere, and it was about an hour and a half drive. I said, yeah, it's 3 hours and 15 minutes. He goes, what? What the heck were you talking about? I said, well, it's good for up and back. You get a round trip out of it.
It's like a Francis Ford Coppola movie.
Exactly. We left very little on the cutting room floor last month. I'll tell you that. So, all right. So getting on to that, and speaking of last month, and this is a perfect segue into some comments and corrections. So speaking about last month, how you and I were talking about the area in Horizons where the scuba team was getting ready, and also behind them was an area where you could be above water and then dive into a hole in the floor and get into the water. And that area would have been pressurized so that the water doesn't come up, etc. So Kaitu wrote in, or is at Futureport on Twitter, and said the correct name for that is called a moon pool.
All right.
You were searching for that, so that's what it is.
I know, for all the years I've watched movies and things that have those in them, I never knew what it was called. And thank you. You've added another piece of knowledge now that I will.
That's right.
Never forget.
Isn't it bizarre that something that's way up in the sky is something that's in the water? I don't know.
Gonna get some moon soup and eat it in the moon pool. And
that's right.
Staying on topic.
That's
today.
right. There we go.
Some moon pies.
If you've seen the movie Abyss, right? There's a lot of moon pools in that thing.
Yeah,
there is.
Yep.
Johnny Quest
up on the Navy SEAL.
Johnny Quest had a ton of moon pools. That had moon pools. I love 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea. They had a hatch in the bottom that they could go down in. Same principle.
Titanic had
accidental, right?
Titanic didn't have it. But the Starship, no. Was it the Enterprise, or was it the Klingon Bird of Prey that they had one in Star Trek 4? Because there's a one where they're going out into the ocean.
Is that Search for Spock?
That's 4. No, that's
definitely
Voyage
4.
Home.
It's
Voyage Home.
Yeah,
Voyage Home.
But
got it.
I have a vivid memory of them going in and out of an ocean. It might have been from one of the episodes from either the Enterprise series or Voyager, or one where they took the ship under the ocean and somebody goes out through the hatch. But there's definitely a Star Trek where that happened.
Have you guys ever seen what was that show that was on in the 60s? Oh, Voyage to the Bottom of the Sea.
Voyage to the Bottom of the Sea. I was going to mention that.
Yes. I wonder if they had any moon pools at the Gungan City underground. Star Wars: The Phantom Menace.
You never know.
Now there was a different membranes that they swam through.
There was a different type of moon pool in National Lampoon's Vacation with Christy Brinkley. So that was a totally different type of moon pool.
That one was brisk. We're just gonna keep throwing out water references here. Yeah, exactly. Sci-fi and comedy movies.
All right, moving on. So last month, if you guys recall, it was the last month or the month before, we talked about Meisner's Lounge and where that came from. And Disneyfied Ash, she wrote into us. This is our friend Ashley. A friend did a walking tour in Palm Beach and found Meisner's home, saw Meisner's home and the grave of himself and his beloved pet monkey.
Wow.
So if you are in Palm Beach, you can go check out his pet monkey grave. And apparently the monkey went everywhere he did.
Nice.
So
Michael Jackson wasn't the first, huh?
That's right. So another comment for Horizons. This is actually for the Mesa Verde scene. We talked. This is Lucy writing in, and she did a little bit of research for us. That's the scene where the woman is farming, and she said that back in that time, the Horizons was developed and open. Only 5% of U.S. farmers were female, and now still less than 20%. And she saw that the dad was home baking the cake, so to speak. So really, given the time frame, it was really ahead of its time. And she also commented, since that's 2083, somewhere right now, it's 2019, the grandparents in the ride are alive now.
So it would have been 2076 because it would have been the tricentennial.
Right.
Because that's the whole century.
Oh, yeah.
That was what the whole thing was about.
So 2076 minus 2019 gets us 57 years old. They'd be 57 at the time, which is pretty close. Maybe, I think that's about right.
Yeah. So one of you listening right now will be the grandparents in this thing a few years from now in 2076.
Write us when you get there.
Yeah.
So, and the last comment is Joe Barlow. Really enjoyed he says, enjoying every one of the 194 minutes. In the floating classroom scene, nobody mentioned that the pet seal name is Rover. So another back down to the moon pool area. Another nod to Carousel of Progress because the dog was at one time was Rover.
Thank you, Joe, for pointing that out. That was wonderful.
Now, how to in our ongoing chat, we all work together before an episode and share anecdotes and stories and pictures that we found after our show and before the next one. How I did clip and send you a picture that I clipped out of of the teddy bear in the space scene, and it did remarkably look like Pooh. And it's hard to tell, though. It's really hard to tell if there was Pooh there or not.
So I think there might have been two bears. At some point, there might have been a regular bear, and then it got switched to Pooh. So that's the work I have to do, is to try to figure out if that's actually what happened, and then. Because that's plausible. I mean, who knows? Maybe someone stole the bear and like they replaced it with a Pooh bear, or someone decided to add a little synergy. Michael Eisner came in and said, "Let's get some synergy in here. Let's put a Pooh up
Where's
there."
the characters?
Yeah, exactly.
That's right. Sounds boring. Where are the characters? So, all right. Well, that does it for corrections comments. I'm going to pass the baton over to Mr. JT for the listener mailbag.
I'll be sure not to drop it here. Okay, well, I have some good stuff, some breaking news, which we'll get into here as the last one. The first one is from Top Jimmy. Jimmy just wrote us. He said, "Hi, I just started listening a couple weeks ago. I started with the newest, then quickly went back to episode 1. I love hearing it, hearing discussion. Says his first trip was in the winter of 72, followed by yearly trips from there. One of the recent episodes, episode 7, was all about souvenirs. He didn't hear it mentioned. It may be mentioned later, but I don't think we did. He says a couple of souvenir merchandise memories that stand out are the early 80s Tomorrowland gift shop, the radio meter bulb spinner, and the Spacewarp Toy Coaster by Bandai. I always thought both those fit in the theme of Tomorrowland so well. We're not really seeing it in any other stores, and I finally convinced my parents to get me both as his trip souvenir. Does anybody recall those?
He sent pictures of those, and I don't I cannot remember those in the store specifically, but I absolutely recognized both of those items. Like when I saw the picture of the box of the little the Bandai toy is like a roller coaster, and they still sell those ones today, but like I instantly recognized the typography and the picture of the kid on it. And I remember back then, it's like they sold those little solar spinners. It's like, it looks like a light bulb with the little black triangles inside, and then it spins when you turn the light on. It's like that was a common item. And I was trying to think of the different things that was sold in Mickey's Mart there. And for a while, there were like a bunch of like, you could get tops with like holographic, like colored tops on them. So like, it was all like, sort of touristy, sciencey stuff. So those, and like, the balls, the physics balls that would hit each other. And like, I remember for some reason, there were these like plastic bases with a motor on it. And then there would be like sort of like plastic pipes sticking out of it with bends in it. And when you turn it on, they'd kind of rotate on their shafts individually. So all these like little things that you could look at, and like, remember those wave things that they would sell at Spencer Gifts,
with the oil, mineral, mineral
so they would
oil
sell that
stuff
kind of stuff. It was all this kind of like pseudo sciencey.
It was over. This stuff was over at Centorium too, right?
Yeah, I'm sure by the 80s it was. Yeah. So
it's just like, wasn't there like, I feel like always 2, 3, 4 pages in like the Sears Wish Book that had all this junk in it. Like I remember seeing a full page on the roller coaster and the little garbage below it.
I mean, not to take off on a tangent here, but one of the things that I was really trying to think back of is, we're very accustomed now to Disney having, I think we have this perception that since Disney has a lot of its own merchandise, that it's different from when you go to an amusement park. But during, the 70s and 80s and even into the early 90s, a lot of the stuff that you would see there in some of the gift shops was like, it was very typical amusement park stuff. There's a magic shop. It's like there was a place where they would make saltwater taffy. There's, you could buy hats. So like a lot of the things were not unique to Disney. It was like very normal things that you would find at any amusement park or very touristy destination. So it's like the kind of toys.
All of those milk glass mugs.
Yeah.
Like any amusement park you went to would have the logo of the park, and then you could get it with mom or dad or your name on it. And so they always had that kind of stuff. But, we talked about that with the Treasure Craft.
Yep.
That, the Treasure Craft ceramic stuff that they sold in the resort gift shops and in the park gift shops, which was one of the higher end, nicer things. I mean, flea marketing, I find them in almost identical designs for tourist destinations from, Chicago or Niagara Falls or, San Francisco, or you can find that stuff all over the place. So it was just, that was the nature of tourism souvenirs back then. I mean, you got thimbles, you got pins, you got shot glasses, and Disney was no different. They had all the same stuff.
Yeah, I think you even used to be able to buy those little popping firecracker things that you throw on the ground. It's like, I think you could buy those in the magic shop. I mean, it was very, and of course, like the invisible dogs, and like it was, it was all the hokey tourist stuff across the board. So
yeah,
great time. I love that time. Very different.
A squirting flower for your lapel.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, okay, so this is not the souvenir episode, but that's a good. It shows that, man, we could do a whole other episode on souvenirs.
Yeah, we did. We did ephemera and souvenirs a while back. It's probably time to do another. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. All right. Well, thank you, Top Jimmy. That's a good one. Next up, Sean Doyle. He says, "I have to know if I'm dreaming this up, but was Morgana the fortune teller in the Fiesta Fun Center in the 70s? I waited to hear her name, but no mention. Please help me out, Sean."
Hal, that's all you. Was it Morgana?
And the answer is yes. And I know this for a fact because our friends over at Widen Your World actually have pictures of Morgana, and I believe he has quite a bit of a write-up about her in his Fiesta Fun Center page. The cool thing about Morgana, if you guys look this up on everybody stop, go search on your phones and find this. It was kind of like a fortune-telling machine, but the gag was inside of the glass ball was basically the same kind of setup as Madame Leota in the Haunted Mansion. So there was like a glass ball, and inside was a head, and then rear projected on the head was this face that would talk to you. So when you got your fortune, it would light up, and she would actually say your fortune to you through the face. So it was very spooky, and a lot of people were like always freaked out by it, but it was a very cool
Give
machine.
me a quarter, I'll tell you your fortune.
It looked super 1960s, like computery 90. It's a really fantastic looking machine.
Well, we'll put a picture of that because I just saw it, and it is very creepy. But it almost reminds me of those. What are those machines where they mold the the things, the Moldorama or whatever?
Oh yeah. It does have that feel.
Yeah, that similar look, but definitely pretty cool looking. So we'll post that picture. Well, thank you, Sean, for that. Next up, we have Michael McClure. Michael says, "Greetings and salutations from the great state of Wisconsin. Send us some cheese, Michael. I love cheese.
Fresh curds, preferably."
Yes. I have never.
So wait, that is an absolute former travel gift. We've talked about that. If somebody went to Florida, you got a gift of citrus. If somebody went to Wisconsin, you got a tray of cheese.
Yep.
Where else? Come on, throw something else out at me.
You'd bring back sourdough bread from San Francisco.
From San Francisco. Saltwater taffy from the Jersey Shore.
Yep. And the one thing that you can buy at every tourist destination, come on, guys, you should know it. No matter where you go, you can always buy
saltwater taffy.
Fudge.
Fudge, yes.
Fudge
and
why that
apples
is everywhere.
It can be like a sweet treat on the road,
My grandmother would bring it back. It's like, I can get that down the road. Why did you bring me fudge? Bring me citrus.
Well, it depends, because if you're in New England and you get Panouche fudge, you can't get that anywhere else. Because nobody else knows how to make it. They're the only ones that sell Panouche. So look it up, folks.
Will do.
All right. Well, Michael, so thanks for writing. No, I'm just kidding. That's Michael says he's never written to a show before, but he just binge listened to all 50 episodes.
Fantastic place to start.
Of the podcast while working in his office, and thought he should thank us for creating such incredible content. So he kind of goes on to tell some different stories about his first visits, how often he goes back. He just wanted to tell us thank you for bringing us listeners back to what it was like, because now I feel like I actually was there. You guys do such amazing work, and wishing us nothing but success. So thanks for the kind words, Michael. We always appreciate those nice emails. All right, so my breaking news. If you guys recall, we've had this come up maybe once, maybe twice before, the infamous Stormalong Bay question. People are asking us, I think it was one I forget the name now, I'm sorry, but go back in episode we talked about this. The question was there ever real fish to swim with in Stormalong Bay? Last week we said no. We kind of just said there's no way, that's not true. Well, we had two separate emails to discuss this. The first one was from Patrick Birkins. Patrick and I discussed back and forth some various things, but he says this about the Stormalong Bay fish. While listening to your latest show, someone asked about the fish in the pools of Stormalong Bay. This was true. They planned for a river ride where you could float and snorkel with freshwater fish, not saltwater. So I think we didn't really think freshwater for some reason.
Yeah, we were going salt all the way.
Yeah, Stormalong Bay has 3 separate areas, and when you look, or if you know the pool, it's the one right in the middle. That's where they were supposed to be, because the one on the one side is the sandy part, and the other one is for where the slide spits out, and then it goes from there. It has its own filtering system, and the water has pumps moving the water in one direction, and people put tubes in there now. So I haven't seen this, but maybe it is sort of lazy river style now because it was supposed to be like a current.
It does have a loop in it. It's the only one that has a loop. I just sent you guys a picture because he also sent in an overhead Google shot. So take a look in the chat. We'll post this picture too. It was right there in that center area. So look at that.
So next up, he says, we're going still. We stayed in the resort May 1990, which only cost $89 back then. One of the lifeguards was there setting the pool up prior to the grand opening, said they couldn't balance the pH levels in the water. They would put the fish in the next morning. They would find tons of floaters the next morning. Disney managed figure waking up, going out on your deck and looking at down, seeing the dead fish was bad for a high-end hotel.
Yep.
So that is from Patrick. Thank you so much, Patrick. We appreciate that insight. Now,
and don't forget, he sent in a screenshot of it in the Birnbaum book.
Yeah.
It says a unique snorkeling experience, bass and crappies and other indigenous freshwater fish.
Yeah. So that was legit. Next one here, same thing. We had it's amazing. We put a question out, we get all these responses. David Carver wrote us, and he says he can confirm they didn't plan to create a shark reef type area in Stormalong Bay. He says they stayed there right after the pool opened, and they left an apology letter in his room saying that they hoped they could make it work or why it wasn't working. He said, I'll get back to you. Well, believe it or not, David found the letter and sent it to us. It's directly from the GM of the hotel. What year did he say
and
this was?
We found the GM.
Yeah, we found the GM
we found the
too.
GM.
Which we'll say his name here, and if you know it, let him know we want to talk to him.
He's in Mexico City, so
yeah, we got Skype. Here's the letter. Dear, and I'll post this. We'll post it on the show notes. Dear resort guests, we're very happy that you've chosen us. Blah 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 blah. The centerpiece of our resort is Stormalong Bay, a 3-acre pool. When we planned this resort, we intended to have a snorkeling lagoon where guests could swim among the fish. Although this feature has been advertised for a variety of reasons, we are not able to offer this particular experience. Please be assured that all of our other features of this special area, including our whirlpools, bubbling jets, rising sands, and water slide, are all available. Thank you, Antonio Torres, GM of...
So, Ted, Mr. Documents here, what's that letter worth?
I probably, to a collector, I'm going to say maybe $30.
Oh, wow. Get that puppy insured.
20 to 30 if it was at auction.
What if it had a photo of some dead fish from one of the morning cleanouts?
$50.
So that's David. Thank you, David, for that. So listener mail, if you have something for the mailbag, podcast@retrowdw.com. Send us a message, send us a tweet. We get it all. We read it all. There's a chance you could get on the show, but anytime you hear something or think of something to tell us, for sure, let us know.
All right, well, it's time for this month's audio rewind. Hal, you've been setting them up pretty good here, and after you caused everybody to take a tumble last month, you bought them back this month. You got over 100 or so, more than 100.
Thank goodness.
So
Thank goodness.
You hit some here. All right, so before we give the answer, let's take a listen to last month's audio rewind.
But you gotta check out the rap.
And if you guessed Food Rapper from Food Rocks, you are correct. And guys, that was voiced by none other than... Come on.
Nobody.
There's nobody, no? It was Tone Loc.
Oh.
Tone Loc. Do you remember? Him?
Please
JT?
play some right now in the back.
Let's take a listen to...
All right, nigga. Come on.
I mean, it was literally that song, JT.
Yeah.
Oh, it was?
It was.
Yes.
They
really didn't do much to disguise it. That was the whole purpose of Food Rocks.
He was also in the Disney movie Blank Check. The same year. Maybe he was under a little Disney contract for perhaps.
It's funny how those connections. I always thought like you see Paul Rubens in Flight of the Navigator, and then suddenly shows up in Star Tours, And I think there's some sort of like well thought out connection of like, oh, someone said like, we'll have you do that, and then we'll have you do that. And then I read like these little stories about how like the guy who was in charge of casting for Star Tours went to go see like the studio preview of Flight of the Navigator and thought like, oh, that guy's got a great voice. I should hire him for Star Tours and see if he'll do it. But it wasn't figured out ahead of time. It just kind of like spills over like from one thing to another. So, but it's always funny how like somebody does something for Disney and then suddenly they're doing something else for Disney and then something else for Disney. So I'm sure there was some kind of unintended connection between Blank Check and Food Rocks.
Goes to show you never burn your bridges, kids.
That's right.
That's right. So we do have a winner. Congratulations to Christian Kandari. So he got that correct. So we'll send that out. And what are you getting? A poster as well as some additional retro WDW swag that we've got lined up here. So we need a prize for this month, and I've got some additional older Disney news and some random ephemera from the parks that I'm going to throw in. So we'll get that out along with some retro WDW stickers. And if you know the answer to this month's Audio Rewind. All right, if you think you know the answer to this month's Audio Rewind, send your guesses to contest@retrowdw.com. All entries must be received by August 15th, 2019. All correct entries will be entered into a random drawing to win this month's prize. All right, and JT, we have something else to give away this month, too. You had a onesie.
Yes, my son
was Andrew's.
He
grew out of it already.
His gargantuan son. What's the weigh-in this month at?
Yeah, put him up on the scales.
7 months. I think he's around 22 pounds now. He's a big cat. He's a big guy. He's teething now, so we're not getting much sleep. 7 months sleep regression. So and that ties to all the emails I got because I last month I said, hey, I have the speed ramp onesie designed by Hal Bowers. He was planning to wear it this summer, but it doesn't fit him. Not Hal, my baby. And he never put it on, so it's brand new. And I said, hey, just email me if you want it. I got probably 10 to 15 emails, just people saying they're going to have a kid soon, asking, being nice, whatever. So you have all that to look forward to. But my winner, through randomly selecting Matt Gaz, Gahs, Matt, you are the winner. He says he heard you have a onesie. We have a little one on the way due in November, and we'd love to dress him or them, they don't know what it is yet, it looks like, in some LBVHS swag. So thank you, Matt. I'll shoot you an email here, get back to you with your address and all your contact info. And everybody else, congratulations on the babies coming. Best of luck, and thanks for listening to the show and entering the contest.
There we go. Thanks a lot, JT. All right, so before we get into the main topic, we want to kind of remind everybody what's going on with Retro Magic, and then JT's got something additional that we've added in. So, Brian, why don't you say it the best? Explain to people, if they haven't heard by now and haven't listened to us, what are they in for with Retro Magic?
You are in for a stupendous, supercalifragilistic, fantastic, wonderful, good time.
All in one.
All in one as we celebrate our 5th anniversary and our twisted obsession with this resort theme park mecca in Central Florida. So what we've got lined up, we're going to skip the Saturday night event because that's been sold out for months.
Thank you to everybody who purchased tickets.
We won't entice you with details about an event you can't go to.
If you are at Epcot that night, say hello, I guess. Maybe wave at us.
If you can find us.
Yeah. If you can find us, we'll be in the on one of the islands on World Showcase Lagoon in the center. If you can get a boat out there and find us, that's where we'll be. But no, Sunday at Atco Raceway Sunday, October 13th at the Contemporary Resort Hotel. We, in the Ballroom of the Americas, we are hosting Retro Magic, our 5th anniversary celebration. It is a day-long event starting at 9:30 in the morning. It includes a luncheon buffet with the original 100% genuine handwich
And these weren't on ice for the past 20 years. These
were not. These are special order. In fact, we started working with the food service team this week, and we lucked out because when I sent my very detailed specifications to work with the chefs on, Todd and I lucked out that our rep is her first job at Disney 28 years ago was in the land farmers market scooping and filling handwidges.
No way!
Yes.
Is that not cool?
That's news. That's insane.
She immediately started laughing, saying, I not only know what you're talking about, she said, I literally filled thousands of those things.
I spoke with her on the phone, and she said she read it, and she literally started laughing out loud. And so we have the best person to be on this for us.
Yeah.
Did she say, what's wrong with you as well?
No, she was totally psyched. She understood.
Man,
That's awesome.
This is they're all secretly rooting for us.
It's all locking in.
Yep.
Yeah, it's all locking in. But it's not just about the food.
No.
This day, it's a $100 ticket. And what that gets you is a full day, lunch included, presentations from Disney legends like Bob Gurr. Disney legend Bob Gurr worked with Walt Disney, and Bob's famous tagline is, if it moves in Disneyland, I probably designed it. He built cars and trains and monorails and stuff from scratch, modified them, and he is a terrific presenter and interviewer and raconteur in general with the fans. Our friend Disney legend Tom Nabby returning with us this time. One of Walt's last hires in the park there is Tom Sawyer in Disneyland, and he's been with the company ever since. And the panels of the men who built Epcot, and was the lead opener on the monorail when the resort opened. And he's got more stories. He'll forget more stories than we'll ever remember or get out of him. We have recently retired Imagineer Tom K. Morris after a 30-plus year career with the company, involved in everything from Disneyland and Epcot Center and Disneyland Paris and Disney California Adventure, and he's got fascinating stories that he shares with us and a treasure trove of pictures that he took of these attractions as they were being built. And stories that go along with them. We've got Michael Campbell coming from the Carrollwood Pacific Society to come and talk to us about the Fort Wilderness Railroad and the history of trains. Michael's working hard on his presentation right now. I'm not even a train guy, but I could sit and listen to him for 3 hours. So he's a great presenter. You'll recall we did an episode with him earlier this year or last year. I don't recall.
We actually interviewed him off air and used a lot of the content in our own.
That's correct.
Yep,
that's correct. So we have that. Last amongst the legends workers for the company, I don't want to leave out our exclusive interview with Rolly Crump. Rolly and Bob Gurr would qualify as the last original Imagineers who worked with Walt that are still with us. And so we wanted to bring Rolly to us in person, but Rolly is at a stage of life now where he doesn't travel anymore, and he's based in Southern California. So we brought Retro Disney World to him, and we flew out and recorded an interview with him that is being edited currently, and that will be shown exclusively. And you're going to learn a lot of great stuff there because Rolly had a big hand in some of your favorite attractions at Walt Disney World, in the Magic Kingdom, and in Epcot Center. So that is edge of your seat kind of stuff. We've got some cool experiences planned related to some of these that are going to be exclusive for you guys that attend the event. And that's not all. We've got music. Todd, why don't you tell them a little bit about the music?
Yeah, so we have a couple musical acts coming into play. Tammy Tuckey, who she's been on the show before, and she put out her album where she got permission to re-record some songs. She will be bringing with her Ali Olmo, the original recording artist of Two Brothers at the American Adventure, so they're going to perform that song. Singer-songwriter Lisa Bastoni is also confirmed to join us. She is the granddaughter of Walter Einzel, who designed the Age of Information exhibit over in FutureCom, and she'll be joining us and also singing the song to that attraction, which we recently learned some very interesting information about, and we'll reveal at the event. So, and we also, Brian, we can't forget, from the movie side of things, we have producer and director Jeff Blythe joining us too. So he'll be talking all about how Circle Vision 360 films are made and the trials and tribulations. He's got some great stories that we did not talk about on the podcast interview with him about shooting in China and some of the other challenges that 360 and 9 cameras gets you. So it is going to be. Oh, we got Ron Schneider too. Do we mention Ron Schneider? He's joining us too.
We haven't mentioned him yet. No, we haven't mentioned him yet.
And Jim Sarno, Disney Imagineer Jim Sarno is going to be there. We have tons of surprises. Ron Logan. My goodness, the list goes on.
It's going to be a jam-packed
How
day.
are you going to do this in one day? It doesn't even make any sense.
We'll find out together.
You got 3 hours. That's it, Hal. It is going to be a very long 9 to 5 day, that's for sure. And we have a giant to-do list that we're working on. There's a lot for all of us to take care of and get going on it. And we're looking forward to seeing everybody in October. So there's plenty of tickets still available. It'll be in the Contemporary Ballroom of the Americas, A and B side. As Brian said in one of our other episodes, it's not just going to have, really going to be a double A side. So all prime content, no deep cuts here. And you can get your tickets at retromagic.net. And as Brian pointed out, they're $100 per person, and that includes your lunch, the entire day, and a special gift. And we're just going to say it will be awesome. We'll leave it at that. All right, now to go along with that, JT, you've been working with somebody to make some special custom things with a few different designs on them. So why don't you tell the listeners a little bit about what we've got available now?
Yeah, my first thought was, we have the shirts, retrowdw.com/support us if you want to get a Retro Magic shirt, to wear the event, whatever. And then I kind of always see this company pop up randomly. They do basically custom overlays for your Magic Band, which everybody's wearing now, and we get it's not retro, but at the same time, if you have a Magic Band, why not make it retro? Why not make it fun to either match the event or match your favorite podcast or your favorite society? So the cool people at magicyourband.com, they did a little collaboration with us. They designed for us 4 different Magic Bands. We have one for Retro Magic, we have 2 for Retro WDW, and we also have 1 for the Lake Buena Vista Historical Society. They're $6, and they basically just stick onto your Magic Band, but it's kind of a cool little thing. So if you're in the parks and you want to spruce up your Magic Band to show your support, check them out, magicyourband.com. And like I said, the Retro Magic one would be a awesome little add-on for the event if you're coming in October.
And the great part is when the event's over, you can just rip it off and go back to your normally scheduled programming and colors.
Exactly.
Or continue to promote us. We'll take that too.
Yeah.
All right. Thanks a lot, JT.
No problem.
All right, well, it's time for the main topic this month, which is part 3 of Horizons, the Legacy. So we have a couple things to accomplish here before we talk about the eventual demise, the destruction, and really what legacy did it leave in our hearts and minds. But if you remember last month, how you and I were up late burning the midnight oil, JT and Brian had gone to bed, and we're so exhausted. What was it, like 1:30 a.m. when I think we finally finished? Something ridiculous.
Did we? Is that how it went?
It's like
it went late. It went late. It was nearly 4+ hours of recording time, and that I edited down to 3:50.
You guys were dreaming it while we were doing it.
That's right.
That's true.
So Hal and I stepped off actually, we didn't even really fully get off the ride. We said, there's a little bit more here. We ended it. And so Hal, we've got a little bit to catch up on. Then we have to talk about walking out of the exit, and then everything about the mural and all that. So let's get back in our ride vehicles here, but we're going to actually go backwards because we had a listener write in. I forget the gentleman's name. Maybe you have it handy. And a lot of people wanted to know how the ending system worked, where you chose your own adventure there at the end. And I jokingly said, I read it a couple times. I don't understand how it works. But Hal has sat down with engineers. He still has looks like he's got his mechanical pencils and all of his protractors. He's figured this out, and he's going to explain to us tonight how the choose your own adventure area, choose your own ending, I should say, worked out. So what do we have here?
Well, and it's pretty well explained in George McGinnis's book too, and it's quite. And I think the person who asked us the question is like, does it work like the Harry Potter ride where like the screen travels along with you? And this is the crazy thing. And again, this is 1982,
right?
What they did was they had a brand new kind of a projector from GE. So it was new video, higher resolution video projector technology. The screen didn't move.
I think it was called the Tellurian, by the way.
That's it. Thank you.
Yes.
So the screen didn't move. There's basically kind of like a circle, I don't know what's the word, like a spherical screen in front of you that your car would go around. And what it did was when you picked out what one that you wanted, the projector would actually, there was some sort of computer control in the projector, and it would actually project the image in front of your car, and it knew how long it took you to get from your car, from where you start to the other end. And I think it might have used two projectors. I'm not sure if it was just one or if it was two, but the image would actually travel in front of your car. Like they would stack them up and then kind of digitally move these sequences with you. So the projector itself wasn't moving. It wasn't like there was a mirror that was like altering where the projection was, and a bunch of it was literally like one projector, and it would stack them up kind of like side by side in memory, if you will, and then move them along as you picked them. So that's the reason that really the flaps needed to be there, was because the image for the car next to you would literally be right there next to the one that you were looking at side by side. And I think it was one of the engineers that were working on it was like, oh, that's kind of distracting. Originally they didn't have them. And then someone said like, oh, we should really have some kind of baffle or something there, so that way you can't see the one that's next to you, since they're all simultaneously running at one time. And
you're saying that you went into that one, how many dome, this is the single dome, like one Omnimax screen. How many cars were in there at one time showing? Were there like four across?
I want to say like 12 to 16 at one time. I don't have the.
So there was 12 to 16 movies showing at once.
Same time. So this is really, really big technology for that.
And you could tell when you moved from one projector to the other, because it would be this almost like a Star Wars wipe across the screen that and the colors weren't perfect, so the colors would slightly change from muted to more saturated.
Yeah,
it was
probably.
Interesting.
And I think that's why it also kind of looked a little bit more low resolution in that area, because it wasn't like the full resolution of the projector being put in front of you. It was actually, a segment of that. So if it was like so you were seeing like a bit of pixels like in the overall screen.
I can read the official description from the Horizons Ride Control System manual published by Imagineers.
That would be perfect, because that's the one that blew my mind, and I left frazzled. But go ahead.
The traveling video finale show area provides a conclusion to the ride. 19 picture frames moving on a track are synchronized with the ride vehicles, such that 7 frames are aligned with the 7 ride vehicles in the scene at any one time. 7 TV projectors are used to rear project images on a 50-foot wide screen behind the moving frames. The pictures being projected are electronically wiped from projector to projector in synchronization with the moving frames. This system allows continuous viewing of a framed show scenario projected from the TV projectors while the vehicles continue to be in motion.
There you go. So you can remove everything I said, Todd, because that's the right answer.
So it's rear projection. That means like rear behind the screen, or
it was like a CRT projected,
not rear behind the car, but rear.
No, rear behind the screen. Yes.
Yeah.
Boy, so this, like, you imagine all this going on and all this syncing and movement and stuff. Like, am I wrong in saying Soarin's kind of simple in comparison?
Yeah, you move the vehicle and let everything.
Yeah, like one video and I see feet dangling in front of me. There's no flaps or anything.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if you ever saw that little behind the scenes thing, but like the guy that invented the Soarin system basically built it out of Tinker Toys.
Yeah,
first
set
to make sure that it would work.
There's one major difference though. If you get the center seat, Mesa Verde looks straight up and down. It doesn't get bent, so. So, as opposed to Soarin. But, cool. Well, there we go. So a little detail, and Ted, tell the people a little bit more about this document, because I think we linked to it, and we can certainly link to it again. This is a heavy, detailed maintenance manual. There's a lot. I see you holding it there. It's like this is the one I was referencing, like 50-some pages.
It is 55 pages. It's called Specification Horizons Ride Control System. It's a very technical manual. It has all the electric and technical specifications that power the vehicle, all the specific part names. There's torque and duty cycle, acceleration, deceleration. It's a very technical to say exactly what powered it and how the ride ran, with diagrams all throughout. And it is fascinating. It's it's very in the weeds, and it's not a fun read, but for those who are really engineers, I think they'll get a lot out of it.
Or if you just have a hankering to build it again and bring it back.
Ted has the blueprints.
Yeah.
Can I bring up a topic about the ending that I'd like to get your opinions on?
Sure.
I was always confused. Why in each one you're traveling from underwater to an underwater port, a spaceport to a spaceport, a land port to a land port? Why didn't each one start in land, space, or sea and go back to future port? I never understood the logic. Of going with it always
right. You didn't get anywhere.
And what's funny is I think the voiceover actually specifically says that you're going to pick the way to get back to future port.
I think that's probably what led to my confusion. Is it says that, but it doesn't depict that.
Maybe, or were those supposed to be but it would be cool if you landed in something in that film said future port, Mesa Verde future port.
It's like Soarin'. At the end of Soarin', you come back to Disneyland.
Right.
You land. So I was always imagined that here, maybe you're right. Maybe that's the future port, but you don't start in the future port.
You do in the queue though, at the ride, right?
But I'm saying you don't start in a sea, land, or space, right? It's future port is one place. Right.
So if you're under the sea, it should bust out and come back to Epcot. Or if it's a desert turns into, or space, you come out of the atmosphere. And
it should all come back to a futuristic Orlando or a future port, some depiction of future port. So I'm not crazy in thinking that that's not. That should have been that way, right?
And it should have been. I'm glad they closed it now.
and Ted, it's one of those things that when we look back on it, like we're doing on these episodes, all of a sudden this storytelling that was going on, you start to see the breaks and maybe the inconsistencies that were there, or maybe some of the budget cut caused it. But I mean, I'm wondering how many people would ever pick up on that too. I mean, we're being nerds, we're sitting here, we're critiquing something that doesn't exist anymore down to the nth degree, but how many people really picked it up that you were departing Futureport? You know what I mean?
I mean, I have to hand it to you because I rode that thing I don't know how many times, and that thought never occurred to me, and you're 100% right about that.
Yeah,
you completely, I've missed that whole thing, and you're 100% right, Ted. That is a story inconsistency that makes no sense.
And I'm not, of course, knocking the ride. It's just when you love something this much, you care about the details.
Yeah.
Yep.
And
absolutely.
So much work went into that, shooting those sequences.
Yes. I have some information on that. So David Jones, a special effects veteran of Star Wars, spent 2 years designing all three of those film shoots. Famously, the one that was the most elaborate was the desert one. It involved an 86-foot model and was the longest continuous sequence ever done with miniatures to that time. And it was all done with a computer track. So there's a computer that guided that entire desert ride that you're following, so that it could completely keep the camera from showing a shadow over the desert models. And it was 31 seconds of film for 2 years worth of work. So as much as we are mocking their storytelling, maybe inconsistency, they spent so much time to make such a small amount of film, but of course became an iconic part of the ride.
Absolutely.
And so, yes, they were dedicated to making that experience really remarkable.
I mean, can you imagine today that company, the Walt Disney Company that we know today, spending 2 years to make 15 seconds of some attraction? Who would do that today? That it makes no, in today's climate, that would never be done. And when people, and we'll get to this later on, it's what was the things about, or Horizons that really got us? It's the amount of work that went into making the tiniest little bits of that are just mind-boggling.
Right. And it was a time where that stuff just wasn't easily done.
Right.
So you had to go through those
There's no
lenses.
CGI. You just, yeah.
They spared none of GE's expense.
That's right.
That's right.
I have one of our listeners, Ben Rideau, was kind enough to send me an exchange that he had with some of the folks that worked on that, and we're going to try to get in contact with him to do an interview. But this is just fascinating. So he talked to two guys who worked on it, Rusty Geller and Peter Anderson, and they were cinematographers that worked on that section. So I'm going to read a little bit of what Rusty had to say. He said, "I worked on the Choose Your Tomorrow. I was one of the 2 camera assistants on the project. The director of photography was Peter Anderson, ASC, and he'd be the person to ask like a lot of detailed questions for." He said both he and another fellow that did the computer programming, they used a system called ACES, which was developed for the black hole. And they had another system that also had a person's name that was basically like a humongous... I'm trying to describe this. It's like where ACES was like a single arm with a camera on it. This was actually like a U shape with tracks on the 2 sides, so it could stay perfectly still as it went back and forth. So those 2 guys worked on the filming for 6 to 9 months. This gentleman was there for 2 weeks. He shot the Arizona farm set and the underwater set. He said it was built in a large hangar at the Burbank airport. His job was to manage the film camera and the lens and the walk the rig through the moves as they did the programming, and then later during the filming. He said it was a 35mm Mitchell with a snorkel lens hanging at 90 degrees down and another 90 degrees mount that took it back to horizontal so the lens could penetrate deep into the set. It used Nikon still lenses, which were still common back then. And then, he had twin towers that rode on parallel tracks on either side of the set and a cross beam spanning the set so the camera mount could travel side to side and up and down, and the camera could pan, tilt, and roll. The computer that drove it lived in a house trailer on the stage next to the set because the computer was so big. He said he was a diver, and he still shoots underwater, and he took a lot of interest in the underwater sequence. He said it was shot in smoke to simulate being underwater. So they would actually fill the set with smoke particles to make it look more dense. The runs, so when the camera would run through, were an hour plus each at 1 frame a second. So the problem was, how do you keep the smoke consistent for that long? He said the Grips built a smoke mixing room adjacent to the set. It had black visqueen plastic walls. There were infrared sensors along the set that measured the density of the smoke. And when it started to get thin, a Grip would open a big door next to the smoke mixing room and waft more smoke into the set. The Grips were on handsets. Camera was on handsets. Art department was on headsets. Camera was on headsets. Art department was headsets. Lighting was on headsets. When shooting the set, it had the atmosphere of being in a NASA control room. He said he was on a headset behind the camera on all the runs, so if he felt like it went haywire, he could stop it before damage was done to either the camera or the models. There were video monitors. They were dark and fuzzy in those days, so he had the best view of the house. So he actually rode on the apparatus as it was doing its filming.
And we have a picture of it we have a whole gallery actually on the finale ending models, which you can take a look at and see these. So we'll make sure we add that to the show notes.
Oh, it's amazing because the sets are huge. I mean,
they're massive,
giant.
Yeah,
I mean,
massive.
they dwarf the people. It's like I always think of shooting miniatures, and they're like tiny, but like the underwater, like the bottom of the underwater sets are like 30 feet tall. It's like they tower over the people. And he said the underwater set was actually built at a mixed scale so they could give the set extra dimensions. And he said the transitions between the scales were hidden in smoke. So it's just such care and attention and love put into this sequence. Just phenomenal.
So there's 2 things in one of the pictures I want people to be aware of. What's great is that a picture of the Mesa Verde desert scene, you can see the whole camera rig and everything. In the front, there's coffee cups that span probably they look 50 feet tall. I guess they're sitting on there. And the other thing is that up at the top, I don't know what this is, but this might be the name that they gave to the camera rig. It says Elmer.
Elmer, yep.
Elmer was the camera rig.
So it was named after Elmer Gantry, I think is.
Gotcha. That's a movie. Isn't Elmer Gantry a movie and a book?
Ted, you were right. Elmer Gantry was the name of a 1950s Burt Lancaster movie. So
right, and I think based on a book from the 27.
There you go.
Or something.
So yep. that was their joke.
What we would give to visit that set, right? It would be incredible. And the undersea set was even more ridiculously large. Because it was almost, I don't want to say life size, but it was built ridiculously large. Much bigger than the desert set. I just sent you guys to take a picture. I mean, look at the size of the set compared to the people.
I saw that. Picture's amazing.
It is unbelievable. All right, so after we arrive back somewhere but not Futureport, we are treated to the final scene, which is a wall of fiber optics that was really neat because it was, if I recall how, the wall was slightly curved, right? Wasn't it slightly curved?
I think probably as you were coming around to go back to the unload.
Yeah. It might have been. But what was really neat is the way these fiber optics were, you would see them at their brightest when you were straight onto them. And as you came up, they just had this sparkly look. And they were kind of started as a smaller point, and they went fanned out and out and out and out. And how you can describe it better, because then you have some funny stories about what happened.
Well, that is a perfect way to describe it. So as you're going through this section, and you know what, I don't know if there's a recording of this, because I wish there were, because all of my recordings were post, after GE left. But I believe the person, the same person that did the unload spiel came on and said, thank you for riding GE Horizons, and they actually mentioned the stuff, and I believe then they said something like gathering your personal belongings, and there was a neat little music track. And yes, as you said, there's Disney was huge on using fiber optics back then, so the the fiber optic fireworks in Kitchen Cabaret and in Maelstrom and in the Mexico Rio de Tiempo.
Oh yeah, the fireworks.
It's like they had fantastic fiber optic effects. So as you said, it started with this little wispy thing, and then it would kind of grow and get bigger and bigger, and then at the end of it was a giant fiber optic GE logo.
Yep.
And what we'll have to try to find out is this one of those things that was added on and as an attempt to push the idea that GE was the sponsor, because we know that nice, you actually do have a picture of it.
We have video of it too.
Oh, okay.
The famous Go Sniff an Orange and Watch This video on retrowww.com has the GE logo
perfect.
At the ending.
So
yep.
I'm trying to remember now if it was not there and then they added it, because I think I remember it being added and then one day going oh my God, where did this fiber optic thing come from? So I think this was part of the thing where they did the surveys afterwards and the people didn't associate GE with it. So they're like, let's put a big frickin' GE logo at the end of it so you can't miss out on it. But the funny thing was, and it was really neat, the little lights would build and anticipate and would basically take you into the GE logo, and the GE logo would spin on and appear. Really great effect. Well, after GE stopped sponsoring it, they turned off the GE logo, but left on the rest of the fiber optic thing. So as you were riding by, you saw these fiber optics come up and build, and then they would go into nothing. So it was really strange that they left the whole thing on, but I guess otherwise you would have just been staring at a black wall
right
before the unload ramp. But
ta-da! Nothing.
Yeah.
So then we depart from our vehicle, and the departure area is very similar to the Futureport, actually. It looked very similar. So again, we didn't fly back to the Futureport, but you're going to exit. It's got the same blue and purple theming and different things out there. And it was a moving walkway, and you pick up your personal belongings, like Hal said, and take children firmly by the hand. And we would exit out through quite a maze of exit ramps. were really interesting. I remember them from 86 on, so how maybe you can talk about what it was originally, but I can only describe in 86. I felt like it was almost like Stonehenge pillars and things on top, and they were all at the wrong angle, and they would change color, and it was and you never knew where the end was because you'd make a couple turns, and there were always mirrors to make you feel like it went on and on forever. And you always were reaching out, at least in the version I remember. At the end, you constantly saw this plasma ball at the end with the GE logo in it rotating, and you never got there until the very end because of all these mirrors. I don't know a better way to describe it. It was interesting. And
No, I think you're right. It always reminded me is if the witch's mine where she would like knock down the pillars in Snow White's Scary Adventures.
Yes.
It's like a rainbow light up version of that.
Of her mind,
yes. Yeah. No, that was something that was added again because we went through this whole thing of people not connecting GE with the attraction and that not coming through. So that was the second exit. The first one, I think you just kind of walked around the corner, but there was a very large and now very famous or infamous mural that hung in there, also by Robert McCall, and it gave us the name of our episode. It was called The Prologue and the Promise. And I'm going to hand it over to Ted to tell us a little bit about that mural because it was a absolutely marvelous piece of work.
GE used it for the cover of their 1983 annual report. It's a beautiful fold-out of, it's like a tri-page fold-out of the mural itself, and it says in the report, this is like the first page of the actual 83 annual report. The Prologue and the Promise, this spectacular 19 by 60 foot canvas featured in the New Horizons Pavilion at Epcot, is the work of famous space science fiction artist Bob McCall. While the mural depicts humankind's progress through the ages, it focuses on a bright future, a subject we find most appropriate for both the cover and the theme of this report. So Disney was really leveraging the future of Horizons and what it represented for the future of the company, and how they saw a big growth spurt coming from both the parks and their films. So the mural measures 19 by 60 foot. According to McCall, it took 3 months to develop the concept for the mural. He did it in his studio in Paradise Valley, Arizona. The actual painting of it took more than 6 months, which he did at Disney Studios in Burbank. His wife, Louise, helped him. She's an artist in her own right. And he does remember that he finished the mural in March. So the idea was that it represented the flow of, quote, civilized man from the past into the present and toward the future. It shows all the Earth's nationalities, cultures, and religions. The McCall family are also in there. In fact, there is so one of the few Horizons sold pieces of memorabilia at the time is a jigsaw puzzle of the Prologue and the Promise. I have a copy of the jigsaw puzzle, although I discovered after 2 hours of trying to put it together that it is not complete. But you can spot. Oh, that stinks. Yes, I know. It did stink.
Oh, no. It was not sealed mint, huh?
It was not sealed mint. If it was, I probably wouldn't have opened it. And the seller, I didn't, either he didn't state that it wasn't, or I didn't read it.
You know what, though? There is I think we have a copy. We have a very, very high resolution scan of that. So it's quite possible that we can get that to you, and then you can just print out and cut your own little pieces.
That sounds like a good use of time.
It's kind of like, when you have to repair old art, right? You want to, the Mona Lisa goes in for a cleaning now and then. The Promise here has to get a little piece fixed.
It's a valid point.
Yeah.
So his family is, if you look close enough, you can see his daughter Kathy and Linda. Their husbands and 4 grandchildren, as well as Louise and myself. So it's like 2, 4, 8 of the characters are his own family, and also their dog. So, he was a very famous space artist. This is all he ever wanted to do, and his legacy lives on. Although, ironically, this painting is so famous, but it didn't last very long. So it is. But it is. He said while he was working on the mural, such as his process was for a mural like Horizons, he starts with a sketch. Then he draws a 10-foot master, which he sections off into 1-inch grids. He takes slides of each of the grids. He projects that onto a mural canvas, and then he sketches a very scaled final version. So there's a very elaborate process that he had to develop these things, and clearly it took probably a year or more to get this done. It lasts on because it is probably the most famous part of Horizons that if you have an image of it, that's just such an iconic part of it. And again, the stock cover, the annual report is it featured on the cover of it. But unfortunately, most visitors to Road Horizons never actually got to see it, including myself. I was there in '85. I don't think it was there.
And I can actually recall people like kind of stopping and looking at it and looking at the different, because like off in the one corner you can see like Egyptian pyramids and Greek temples, and as you move through the civilizations, it eventually turns out to be this giant futuristic cities. So it's really fascinating how that was all done.
So I sent you guys a blueprint that's been floating around on the internet that shows where the mural was, and then a yellow line showing how that the exit area was changed. And I never got to see the mural. Now it begs the question: is that there's space in there to leave the mural? And my understanding is that it was taken out. You wonder how long it was there. But there was some where this came from. I thought we got it this past week or something. I got to find this email now. It's somebody wrote in and saying that the mural was actually saved and was deposited somewhere over at the Haunted Mansion. And was rolled up and found back there.
That's interesting because the last I had heard, nobody knows of its location, supposedly.
Yeah, I don't know. It's kind of interesting. I mean, look, we know they dispose of a lot of things at Disney, but I mean, there are certain things that you think if something went into something that's this magnitude and size, you would hopefully try to save it. But how do you roll it up? I mean, you really can't. It's painted on a mall. It's like plaster,
Well, at this point, they probably figured out to not stick it onto a wall because of all the other murals that they have tried to remove over the course of time, and it wouldn't work. So maybe they were smart enough now to not do a permanent attachment. It's funny because there was this old rumor that was going around as to why it was removed. Is supposedly one of the big things that people used to say is that Michael Eisner got into a fight with Robert McCall about something, like potentially the fact that he included his family in the mural, and it was Michael Eisner that had specifically ordered the mural to be removed. But yeah, that was stuff that people would say on Usenet back in the day. But I mean, at this point, looking at the information we have from the actual Imagineers, it really was just the fact that they did guest surveys afterwards, and people were not making the connection between GE and that attraction. And since they spent a lot of money on it, they decided to do what they could do to try to add more of a GE presence. So I know they added GE logos onto certain things, like the spaceship that was outside that was building the space station. There was the GE logos on the vacuum cleaner that the robot was using. So where they had an opportunity to put in a GE logo, they put in a GE logo, and at the exit of the ride, they put in the most intriguing giant spinning plasma ball GE logo that you ever could have seen.
And what's funny is that none of the spiel or anything else was changed, right? It was all the same recording it was honestly what they added other than the logos. It was pretty subtle. There's one major change in the entire ride of a vacuum cleaner bag.
Yeah. Well, they had the little, and I don't know if it was always there. It's they have little, at some point they drop in the, bringing good things to life.
Yeah.
It's
right.
that line is tossed in. So, I mean, they tried to be, and the direction at the beginning was to be subtle about it, which is why it wasn't a big overt thing. And just at some point they, had to do a little course correction.
Well, when you think about it, when you think about the other attractions, if you're GE and you're a corporate person and you go and you see World of Motion, right, and you see all the Chevy stuff after, all the GM stuff, and you go to Exxon, you've got the tiger jumping and everything in the film, and it's you got energy exchange. They didn't have energy exchange. They didn't have AT&T Futurecom. United Technologies, nobody knew what the hell they did anyway of the living seas because it didn't make sense. The Land, you had a restaurant serving craft. Kodak was about pictures. There was nothing other than the pavilion for GE, right?
They should have had a laundromat or something.
Come try out the latest vacuum cleaner, right?
Yeah.
It is really surprising that they didn't do a post-show thing, because when they opened up Innoventions, there was a big GE presence in there. That was really nice and cool.
And in the original Carousel of Progress at the World's Fair, there was a whole GE pavilion to show all their products. So it would have been natural, and it's a perfect post-show ride. I mean, you're thinking about the future, so it was always surprising that you stepped outside and not into something else.
Yeah. I first rode the attraction 1986. I remember it was one of my top threes that I would go to between World of Motion, Spaceship Earth, and Horizons. I would always ride each of them 3 to 4 times. 89 I visited. Brian, you rode it in the early 90s.
I rode it in 95 and then recorded my full ride through in January 98, which is on the YouTubes.
There we go. Maybe I have to get a copy of that and restore that up for you. JT, what about you?
Never rode it.
Never rode it.
My first Epcot visit, I've pinpointed we did Universe of Energy, Wonders of Life, and then that was it over there.
Ted, what about you?
85, rode it twice, the only time I went, but I remember that moment getting on that ride and have no idea what it was. I don't even know that I loved retrofuturism at that point, but I still remember the visceral reaction of what I was looking at, and the moment I could choose my own ending, I was obsessed. I regret never going back, but I'm so lucky that I was able to write it.
And how you wrote it, but you also lived it.
Oh, I know Hal's story. Yeah, it's fantastic.
So we'll fast forward through the 90s here, and other than the changes we just noted, and other than a spruce up now and then, I mean, the internet wasn't there like it is today, so you really didn't get ideas of it, going down for refurb or, hey, we're gonna dust things off. There were no major changes to the attraction that I'm aware of in the entire time it rode, other than those small GE ones that we talked of. Can you think of any others, Hal?
I can't. It had really started to kind of decay for a while there when they were gonna shut. I mean, the plan was to shut it down once Test Track was open, and then once that got pushed off because they couldn't get it working.
Oh, the tire problem. Oh, that's a whole other story, right? That was supposed to open in
95. Yeah, they were closing Horizon. They were closing Horizons in the beginning of 95, and then they just kept extending it because Test Track wasn't ready. And then it just became like a generational affair as, 96 went into 97, 97 went into 98. And they finally closed at the beginning of 99. But, there was this, I said it was the long goodbye. It was.
Can you imagine if that ride was going away today, the merchandise and all the different things that they would have and the goodbye tours.
It's the Main Street electrical parade of attractions. It just it refuses to die. It's.
Well, so I guess we have, in a way, Test Track to thank. And when you see inclinings of things going away, we got to remember this is 20 years ago, so it was a little harder to make judgment on this than it is today, especially now, as we just mentioned, Disney capitalizes on when attractions are going to close, and it becomes a hado, and people go, and they ride, and they cry, and they have ice cream, and it breaks down, and they pet the dinosaurs. It's all sorts of fun stuff that goes with it. But I think we have Test Track to thank for extending the life of Horizons and allowing a specific set of people to go in and really get into an attraction and document it like no other attraction, I think, has ever been documented from the outside. And specifically, we're talking about Hoot Gibson and Chief. And for those of you not familiar, you can we have a copy of all the photos that Hoot and Chief took, as well as their blog. But there's a blog that they did called Mesa Verde Times. So if you look that up, they Hoot and Chief had learned to figure out the timing of the ride, so that they could hop off at certain points and count the cars and figure out if they got on the ride at the right point with this many people between them and the next empty car, or the X number of empty cars between them and the next people. I'm sorry. That they could hop off. They had enough time to hop off, see something, run around, and then jump back in and continue the antics as they went through the attraction. And they eventually got brave enough to camp out, bring food, snacks, water, find hiding spots. And this attraction was built with absolutely no devices to allow Disney to know that there were intruders or people brazen enough to jump off the attraction. Now, you do that in Spaceship Earth, as we learned, guys. What happens? You do that, you're going to be called out immediately.
They're coming for you. We should preface before we go any further, we don't encourage this behavior.
No,
we don't endorse this behavior. We appreciate what they did because of the historical record that it kept for us.
Right.
Today, with the availability of high-res lenses and low-light stuff and telephoto and stuff you just didn't have then, attractions are much more well-documented now. So there isn't the need for this. But the fear was, as Mr. Toad had gone, and you can probably think of 2 or 3 others I'm not remembering off the top of my head, but major attractions at the Magic Kingdom and in Disneyland had disappeared. Submarine Voyage. Yeah, these things that were going away. And this, what do you want to call it? A fandom, I guess, of, Walt Disney. I don't want to say they invented themed entertainment, but they certainly perfected it at WED and Imagineering in the 50s and 60s and 70s. And so this was the first generation of kids who grew up with it that wanted to be Imagineers, that wanted to create this stuff when they grew up, these things that they grew up in. And so this was an effort by some people to document how the magnum opus attraction that married the Epcot era with, Walt's original attraction era, that really was perfection personified. They wanted to document it. So I just felt like it was important to say that, because there's these other yahoos now that jump out and do bad stuff in the parks that, reveal trade secrets and go in areas where they're not supposed to go. And it's to promote themselves, not to promote the things that they're discovering. And there was no fame for these guys. There was no internet. These guys were doing this for their own records. And it's only through time and technological advancements that today we have this just complete wealth of knowledge. And if you listen to our last episode, so much of what we've learned is from those photographs and things that we have that they took that would be completely lost to history otherwise.
And I think there's 2 things here too, as you mentioned, Brian, the technology. I mean, Hoot and Chief were doing this with 35 millimeter cameras that, now you can go out and buy a digital SLR 35 millimeter for, pennies compared to what you could do just a regular film camera back then. So going in and taking I don't know if they were using, point and shoots or if they actually had some adjustable lenses on it, but still the processing, they would never get the resolution. So the time that they needed to spend in there, you needed to take photos from every angle and every possible position, because you wouldn't get everything in a shot. The grain would, the grain of the film would show the resolution of the things they're trying to shoot. And it's
important to note the ethos, because Hoot has addressed it today. They never took anything. They never touched anything. They never damaged anything. They took trash. That was it. They only ever took something that was in the trash.
Yeah, exactly. The other interesting thing, too, is that I think this, in the long term, and you guys correct me if you think otherwise, Disney obviously knows that this went on. After the fact, they found out. I think it's taught them a lesson about ride documentation. At least we hope that before a ride is dismantled, that the appropriate documentation is taken and archived. I think in the late 90s, we were in an interesting time with Epcot, and, it had the wand flying overhead by that time of, 2000's coming or whatever it was. I think we're at a time where, it's past its time. And, now they have to resurrect our memories by just bringing out one or two robots that they happened to save, and the rest went to the trash bin. Right. So I think they've learned something with this, or at least I hope they have. That's my hope.
I also think the prices that they're probably noticing at auctions for Disney items should be registering with them as how valuable people literally believe archives of this stuff is. So I would hope they recognize that as a reason to, keep, and they, Disney archivist, forget his name, who just passed, and they were very big on archiving their company. I think they probably just didn't view theme park items as it. So I would hope that helps.
Yeah, Dave Smith is who you're thinking
Dave Smith,
of.
thank you. Yes,
and
yes.
It's important to note that they preserve one or two 20,000 League submarines. They're not preserving the 24 ride vehicles, and
right. Yeah.
So that
you can't keep everything.
Right.
Yeah. But also, I'm talking about is like properly documenting. My hope would be that if this was 1999, or they're shutting down Horizons next week, that proper documentation would have been done. Not keeping everything, but proper photos, high definition photos, and everything. And who knows? Maybe they did do some documentation. We only will know. But judging on what we've seen, the fact that Disney still doesn't have photos of some things, and they show us a lot at D23 and events, but the fact that they still admit to not having some photos of some things, frogs and whatnot. Those were a long time ago, but still, I think that's telling. So how you Hoot on a personal level through college. We've talked about that before, and your fun times of the opening of the Disney MGM Studios and opening day with Hoot. And you have a closer relationship in knowing what went on there. So I know you're going to reach out to him, and we might potentially have him back on the show to talk a little more. But what else can you tell us about, their escapades and what they were doing and the lengths that they went to complete this archival process, if you will?
Yeah, I think, I got to go on a couple of those expeditions with them because I'm not as brave as they are. There was no way I was going to chance getting my annual pass taken away to spend like 6 hours in there. But I did get to go on a couple of them. And I'll tell you, it was amazing. Just, I talked a little bit earlier about the level of detail in there. Mm-hmm. And just like the level of detail everywhere on those sets was intriguing. You'd go into the apartment in Nova City, and there are photographs of the family that you see later on, of like actors staged as family photos, just like in the like on tables and in bookcases and things, and just all sorts of strange little knickknacks. When you go into Sea Castle, it's like, there's, like I talked about the last time, there's china and dishes, and I actually was able to track down the china pattern. So if you want to have your own
great.
If you want to have your own set of Sea Castle china, you're going to want to find on the internet, the manufacturer was Fitz and Floyd, and the pattern is called Platinum Rondelet. It was made from 1977, I think, until about 1984. So they must have got it. Maybe they got it on clearance. I don't know, but you can have your own set of Horizons dishes now. But just the level of detail everywhere, and then it's always funny to see, because it was staged, things that weren't there. Like I talked about the last time, it's like you go upstairs and the lady is in the bathtub, but only part of the bathtub is built, and she's missing an arm and things because you wouldn't see it from where you were. So it was a really fascinating look at the stagecraft of how those things were built as well. And we really have to thank them for going in and taking pictures of everything, because our understanding of these levels of detail would have been possible without them. and it's, as Brian said, it's like, I don't recommend this anymore. It was a different time. It's like the technology to detect somebody, is now a $5 sensor, where before it was probably like a multi-$1,000 system.
Right.
So don't try this at home, kids. It's not the time anymore. It's a post 9/11 world. It's like people will shoot you now or be very harsh in how they apprehend you if it happens. It's like we've seen people trespassed for, much less of these transgressions these days. But it was a remarkable experience. And I'm just glad that, over the course of time, like, this stuff was able to be saved, and, we have to really, take our hats off to them for putting that together. And we'll talk to them, and we'll get we'll get an interview going on here.
Right. Yep. And Chief passed away about 5 years ago, was it? Just about. Yeah. He had passed away from a battle of cancer. So, a couple other notes here too. We talked last month about how the scent has really, really, is ingrained in our noses too, the orange scent. And we had a section in last month's audio, and I actually cut it out because I didn't have the right thing. But I found actually 2 products that are pretty cool that people might want to try. But the first one is actually a men's shaving cream made by Pacific Shaving Company. And when I had it a number of years ago, it had an orange scent that reminded me of it. There's also another product. I'm going to try to find this one. It's made by a company called Jason. It's different facial cleansers, and they had an orange cleanser that my wife had that smelled very, very similar. So I'm going to look that one up. But the other one, have you guys ever heard of My Sheldon?
Nope.
You haven't? Oh, so it's a great air freshener from Japan. And why Sheldon? It's SHALDAN. Why Sheldon is yours is beyond me. But they have an orange scent. You can get them on Amazon. You can get a pack of 12 for $38, and or a one for $6.94. And it does have a pretty good orange scent, pretty close to Horizons, which is pretty cool. The best part is that when you go to Amazon, it wants to filter your results by your vehicle. So it's asking me to make sure that this let's say a natural air freshener for my car fits my vehicle, which I think it will. So you can give those a try if you want. We'll put the links in the show notes as well.
Will it fit into a solo sub? I really want to know now.
That would be great. Just taking the oranges with you, right? Everywhere you go. So, before we go out on here on our final thoughts about the legacy of Horizons, Ted, you had some information on a potential rehash of Horizons and meshing it together in a very odd fashion in the late 90s.
Yeah, so this is one of my favorite items that I acquired. It's looks like it's on what were the old printers called?
Mimeographs?
No, the before you had for computer dot matrix printer. It looks like a dot matrix printer. Oh
yes.
And it's a proposal for a Carousel of Progress at Disneyland, presented by General Electric. But it's a mash of Horizons and General Electric. So it says the following is a first draft proposal to return, revitalize, and expand the General Electric Carousel of Progress for the new Tomorrowland at Disneyland. In addition, we are once again invited to walk up onto the stage and ride a speed ramp into the future. A full-size recreation of Horizon's space, desert, and urban habitats awaits us on the second level. So this document goes through each one of the theaters. As we know, the Carousel of Progress is built on rotating theaters. So in Theater 1, it would be the Looking Back at Tomorrow section from Horizons with There's a Great Big Beautiful Tomorrow as the song overlay. So that is what you would see in Theater number 1. And then Theater number 2 would be the 1890s Carousel of Progress depiction that we all know and love from the original Carousel of Progress. Theater number 3 would be the 1940s modern home that we also know currently from the Carousel of Progress. Theater 4, and this is how we are able to document this, the date of this document, because it doesn't have a date on it. But Theater 4 is a vacation villa circa 1990. This is a time which must be familiar and identifiable as our present, but stretching to the future so as not to date too quickly. Around the family, we see such modern-day wonders as a giant flat TV, cordless phone, etc. So that's the present. Now, Theater 5, we're at an undersea research station. The daughter is working on a research program that has given her family a tour of the facility. And then it says, this will give us an opportunity to utilize the sea's habitat from Horizons, which was deleted from the second level.
So I think they were originally they must have had an idea to put all of the habitats on the top level, and then they must have realized that they could only fit Mesa Verde, Bravo Centauri, and the other one that you mentioned up there, Nova City. So then they moved or at least part of the undersea thing downstairs.
So then Theater 6 is a space station orbiting the Earth. So now up to 6 theaters, which is more than the Carousel has in the current form. Theater 7 is the urban habitat from Horizons. That's literally what this document says. What I can't tell is this implying that Horizons is now being... Maybe this is one of those years when it was closed before it reopened, and they were thinking of moving Horizons to Disneyland. I can't imagine they're talking about rebuilding all this stuff.
Probably maybe just a couple of the sets.
Maybe. But that...
Yeah, so my guess is they had a problem with not knowing what to do with Carousel of Progress because GE stopped sponsoring that. I think, right. I'm trying to remember when it ended. They were simultaneously sponsoring Horizons and Carousel of Progress at the same time. As you had before, there had been several proposals, I think, to try to move Carousel of Progress back to Disneyland. So what this could have been was an idea to move Carousel of Progress back to Disneyland and then take some of the sets out of Horizons because potentially it was going to close because, they only had a 10-year contract on it. And then to try to reuse, elements of the original Carousel of Progress with these things and entice GE into sponsoring a new show for another 10 years, like based on that, since they were kind of pulling out of everything. So I think the way it worked at Disneyland was there's the load and then the 4 scenes, and then where you would have the unload, it's like that's where you would take the
speed ramp
up to the top. So when they're talking about those, and then the scenes as they're describing it, like scene 6, I think would then be at the top of the speed ramp, like upstairs.
That's where the fission.
That's where Progress City, the model, would have been.
The fission was before that. That's right.
That was World's Fair. So this was, so this would have been using like the integrated top and bottom as it was originally. And then you would have exited out. Once you went to all the experiences, then you would have gone outside and then went down the ramp and out.
Do you realize how many East Coasters would fly to Disneyland just to see that if that was still there today, if they did that?
So it says for Theater 7, the concept is this is the first of 3 habitats taken from Horizons. In order to maintain continuity with the earlier scenes, we see the same family in an extended view of the future. Then Theater 8 is the desert habitat from Horizons. Again, we see members of the family exploring the future. Theater 9, the space scene from Horizons. So this sounds like they are planning to move Horizons from Florida to California.
Yeah.
And they're taking the 4 major scenes.
Yes.
Yeah.
Right. And so ultimately that died when they decided not to do it. So they did the 93 refurb of the Carousel of Progress, and you have the show that you have now down there. Because that would have been, you're right around 1990, 91. They were this pitch had to have been done because Horizon sponsorship, which was 10 years, would have been done in 93. And the Carousel, I think the last refurb prior to 93 was like 1980, wasn't it? When they went in 80 or 81, they went in and redid that, the last scene again and modernized it a bit. And
so the end of the document says, exit onto the second level of the theater, as Hal said, and down in the existing ramp or onto the skywalks around Tomorrowland. This scenario is intended to spark discussions and generate further input into the new Carousel of Progress. New settings, new topic, and new solutions are welcome. The new carousel will truly be a Carousel of Progress. So only wish this had been. I think of every unmade Disney concept I'm aware of or have a document of, this is the one I wish was made.
The GE sponsorship of the Carousel of Progress expired on March 10th of 1985. So it would have been running sponsorless for a couple of years. And then I think they really did want to... Oh, yeah. And the other thing is, like, when you would go to the Walt Disney Story Post show, they showed concept art of a flying saucer ride that was going to go where the Carousel of Progress was. So they might have been banking on the idea of moving it back to California and then putting the new flying saucers in the pad where Carousel of Progress was, because you already had a basement there. So they could have put all the air handler stuff down in the basement and then put the platter on top of it. And then we had to wait another 20, 30 years for Luigi's flying tires to finally bring the flying saucer back.
And still not work.
And yeah.
So, interesting. Well, I now know that we have sparked the interest of many of our listeners now, because they're saying, oh my gosh, can you imagine if that was still there? I have my own thoughts on why I think Horizons has left such a mark on a lot of people. A lot of, we all know what Epcot has done to a lot of minds around our age groups and stuff. So I think we all should kind of give our own thoughts here. And I'll start here. I came up with this idea when we first were doing episode 1 of this, part 1. And it came to me during the spaceship scene when I was thinking about that. I said, okay, that's relatable. And then all of a sudden I was like, wow, they did such a great job. It was realistic. And everything that was presented to you was reachable for the time period, right? So you were being put into something and shown something that was relatable, realistic, and reachable with today's technology and so much hope that that's the direction we were going. And that's kind of what my takeaway from it was. And when you put something together like that, I think it just leaves such a lasting impression in your mind. And I also think because Epcot is my generation's 64 World's Fair, really, that's the way to look at it. I think these left marks on my philosophy and my interpretation and my hope and all that, just as I think the same thing did for my father in the World's Fair, tying that all together. So that's kind of my take on it. And yes, we can go on to how detailed it was and all that. But seeing the space shuttle sitting there, that was relatable to somebody in the 80s. It was realistic. You could feel like you could reach out and be right there. And again, all those goals that were put in front of you were reachable.
So my belief is so much of pop culture's view of the future is dystopian. This is probably the most viewed view of the future in all of pop culture, I'm going to argue, or maybe the last 30 years, that showed a bright view of the future. And it was done with ingenuity. It was done with, to your point, something relatable and believable. It was done with passion. It was done with care. It was done with detail. And every other major piece of pop culture, from Terminator to Waterworld to Blade Runner, that depicted the future, everything sucked in the future, and the world was going to be annihilated or had been annihilated. And here we see the opposite, and we yearn for that. We want to be told the future is bright and that we have reasons to look forward to it. And here was a living, breathing depiction of it that you experienced really close up and really in an immersive fashion before immersion was even a thing in entertainment. And that just resonated and stuck, and people could watch it now on YouTube and videos and still experience that. And nobody else does that. Everybody who wants to talk about the future in pop culture just wants to talk about something bad, and this is refreshing.
I remember, I know I've told this story at some point in the past on the podcast, but my parents both experienced Epcot Center before I got to go. And I just remember hearing them talk about rides, things that they saw that they liked, and not knowing the name of it at the time. They would say a name and then they'd say, oh, that's the one where you can pick your ending. And that, I mean, we touched on it tonight, but that was just a mind-blowing thing. And I think if you take a look at these kinds of attractions, that was a piece of it. The orange scent was a piece of it, because they were elements and the scale, everything in this ride was massive. It wasn't only so immersive, it was massive. The biggest movie screen you'd ever seen, and the building itself was this gigantic footprint, and it looked like a spaceship had landed. And so, you know, it was, Epcot itself was a big thing. Everything in Epcot was big and broad and futuristic throughout, and meant to, it was the opposite of Disneyland. Disneyland, which reaches out and hugs you, and everything's a smaller scale. Epcot was the opposite. Epcot was meant to make you feel small and everything around you feel big. And in a park full of big things, in a place full of big things, Horizons was the biggest. And that's what I think probably cements it. It was all of the things you guys have mentioned, but from a physical sense, it was the grandest place in a place that was full of grandeur. That's my best explanation. And it's never been matched. Nothing that they've done since, that anybody's done. I mean, even everything I've watched from Tokyo Disney Sea and everywhere else in the world where they're doing things, there's nothing on that scale now that they attempt to immerse you at that level with nothing but a message. Right. That whole ride was about a message, and it was consumer products, and it was technological advancements all being done by one company that were the foundation for everything that you saw on that ride. And, it really was. I enjoyed our last episode and Hal and Todd taking us painstakingly through each inch of every scene, because there were things either I didn't know or things I didn't remember. Having even watched the ride videos 1,000 times, it's still been 21 years since I set foot on the ride. So you tend to, things fade into memory, but that's my take on it.
I don't think anything can ever replicate it, because we're too used to expecting the next ride to be bigger and better. And there was a naivete at the time about rides, and we didn't know to think about it. 83, Reaganism, and the birth of the 80s. I just don't even know that anything can ever match that specialness, no matter how great the ride is, how cool it is. I just think it was a time that just can never be recaptured.
And technology now too. It's the leap from 1978, 79, when they started working on this ride, until it opened in 83. The advance of technology, and we're kind of used to now this idea that your 5-year-old computer is ancient. Your 5-year-old phone is like an artifact that belongs in a museum. And back then, those technological advances were just kind of starting. Everybody was moving from rotary to touch-tone phones, and people who, you never had an answering machine. By the end of the 80s, it was weird if you didn't have an answering machine. At the beginning of the 80s, you weren't really expected to have cable TV. It wasn't, but by the end of the 80s, you did. There's VCRs. There's so much stuff that in that decade, it just, they're like two different centuries. Much more so probably than any other 10-year period. It just, the domestic largesse and the things that you had in your home at the end of the 80s compared to the beginning of the 80s. And that ride was like right smack dab in the middle of it. And So there were things you were seeing in that ride that were concepts when they did the ride that by the end of the decade were reality. So I don't expect to be able to ride a Banshee at the end of in the next 10 years. But
well, and that because it brings up a good point is that attractions, we've seen the challenges of predicting the future, Tomorrowland and all that, and technology in future has given way to fantasy, right? I mean, that's what we're seeing more of because it's not going to go out of style. JT, from your perspective, having never been on the ride, you've had to only watching grainy VHS and restored movies and listen to us banter on for hours. I'm curious to see what your take is because you're one of the few, the few on this podcast that never rode it.
I'd say number one, it to me connects with the whole old Epcot feel. World of Motion, Universe of Energy, Spaceship Earth, and then this. When I think like, okay, what did I miss? I still enjoy Spaceship Earth. I like going on. I don't necessarily learn anything because I've ridden it a bunch, and the whole thing of going to Epcot to learn on vacation or whatever. But at the same time, I mean, I enjoy those rides now as I'm older. Now, young me, I look back and I look at my kids. I don't know if they would enjoy it at this point, because it does seem kind of dry, kind of whatever, and unless there were some updates, but. At the same time, I mean, it's definitely something I guess I wish I would have gone on. I don't know, just to say I saw it. When I look at these pictures, it blows my mind that I don't even remember seeing the building. Like that's just how we just walked right past it. Just let's get to Mexico. I mean, it's just crazy to me. It was right there, but yeah. I partially too. This will make some waves. I'm sure. I don't really understand what all the hubbub is about personally. I get it. There's stuff that I miss too there, and I understand the personal connection, and it's something that it was replaced by Mission Space. I won't say Mission Space is my favorite ride, but I don't know. I don't dislike it. It's fun for me, but I don't know. I just kind of watch it, and I'm sitting there going, "Why is everybody freaking out so much about this?" That's just my take, but I don't know.
And I think maybe not being ever seeing it might just cause that thought process. I don't know.
Sure.
Go ahead, Hal.
I look forward to JT reading his hate mail next week in the mailbag.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Don't worry. Nobody's listening by this point anyway.
I think really there's a certain type of person. It's the same way that if we go back and we look at stuff from the 1964 World's Fair, and I look at the Magic Skyway, and I'm like, wow, it would have been really cool to ride that. I mean, I know the dinosaurs probably looked cheap as hell, and the cavemen looked terrible, but through this lens of modern times, to be able to look back at something that's really big, it just looks like it would be fun to ride in. And I think that's what's going on with the fans today. It's like, maybe they only got to ride it when they were 3 or 4, and they didn't get to appreciate it really, or maybe they never rode it, but you see all these pictures and things, and you're like, well, that looks cool.
Yeah.
And for me, it's like I will not be able to eloquently say this, but going through Epcot, and it was such a sea change in attitude. A lot of Horizons was kind of one of the few like old school Disney feeling things that were there. It's like when you rode it, it's like it had that same kind of feeling as the Carousel of Progress. It's like the jokes weren't actually funny. It's like they didn't necessarily land. It's like everything there's a high there, but still enjoyable. Like even though you didn't actually like laugh at the redhead like making jokes about like laser lock with the sub guy. It's like you understood what was going on. There's always this very strange level of comedy with Disney in attractions where it wasn't really, I guess it was kind of like dad jokes or corny.
Well, and it might rightfully be the last attraction that they did that you actually got the sense, even though it wasn't the case, that, well, I would have gotten this ride just like this if Walt was alive.
Yeah.
And the company at that time was still very governed by an ethos of what would Walt do, and it really, that and Imagination were like the last two where you're like, Walt would have greenlit this ride and it would have been just like this if he was alive.
Yeah.
And
in terms of the quality and the delivery and the feel of the ride and the fact that there was something going on other than just let's entertain people for 15 minutes.
Exactly.
Yeah. It was, a 20-minute long ride. There were practical effects throughout the entire thing. It's like there was a rubber octopus down there winking at you. There was a person like stuck with a robot with its feet stuck to the wall to like look like it was floating. There's a giant crystal turning for some reason. I mean, it was for 20 minutes you got to just sit down and like ride through fully three-dimensional sets plus mixed with, film and stuff. It was a very old school approach. Like today, if you were going to do Horizons, it would probably be like Soarin' or some like 4-minute thrill ride.
Yeah.
Like it would not be like a 20-minute long slow churn, with grandparents talking to you.
Yeah, and that, Brian, it's a great point, because if you really look at the timeline of it, when Horizons opened 6 years later, the Disney MGM Studios opened, right? And that was a total change for the company. Eisner was in.
Yeah.
It was
and I was thinking a great movie ride is like, okay, that's the next big animatronic ride that they.
But
did.
it's got explosions and guns, and
it's
just not what.
Like.
So I'm going to quote Marty Sklar, who Brian's channeling. This is from the GE publication. Horizons is a type of pavilion that I think Walt had in mind when he visualized Epcot. It's a synthesis of all the other pavilions in that it encompasses energy, transportation, communications, and so on. And it incorporates a lot of firsts for us as a company.
All of that's true. All of that's true. Because if you... I really do. I think about that a lot as to kind of what came after it. And Movie Ride was the last big, like, adult animatronic type thing, and Splash Mountain would have been the next generation of kind of Fantasyland dark ride full of animatronics,
right?
And it's terrific. It's just, and Walt would have loved it.
Yep.
So I kind of feel like Splash Mountain was the last big original animatronic attraction for the Fantasyland style rides, and Horizons was it on the World's Fair / Epcot style ride.
Here, I have a question for you guys that wrote it, and it's how talking about all these practical effects things happening in this, and you might have went on this on episode 1.5 or something, but did it always work? Was there things broken often? Because you see, all I picture now is current Disney and how there's even a Twitter feed on broken things at Disney. And were things always work? Was it well maintained? All these random things happening, or don't you remember the bad?
I think it's fair to say it was in rough shape those last...
By the end, yeah.
Okay.
I remember in 86 and 89 seeing, not having any issue with it. 86 is, we're 3 to 6 years old, and not seeing any problem with it, and not saying, oh, that's not working. I'm sure there was one or two things that I missed, but how you went to it more than any of us. And yeah.
Well, Hal used to repair things in the ride. He would just hop off and fix something.
Break it.
I want to say I never really felt like the animatronics weren't working. Like one day you would go through, and I know that stuff happens. It's like we just capture it now because we have phones and stuff with us all the time. But I don't feel like I ever was on when like there was a major catastrophic change. And the other thing is, at that time, it's like if there was a breakdown of something, it's like they actually would close the ride. It's like they had a very strict list of like, if this breaks down, if a light bulb went out in the IMAX theater, the whole ride is shut down.
Right.
They did not let you ride through it today like you do when you're riding The Little Mermaid, and then suddenly there's a Panasonic logo up on the wall because like the projector's rebooting.
Right. And let's say, I'll be honest too, is that some of the effects were so effective but so simple that if they did go out, it didn't change the ride to the point where it was unrideable too.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Like the effect of the smoke as a stand-in for like water vapor coming out of the refrigerator when it opened and closed.
Yeah.
It's like, well, that probably died somewhere along the way. The big thing that I remember mostly is like as it got to the end, it's like the audio system. It would like the dialogue would cut in and out, which happened a lot with rides. Even the Haunted Mansion did that before its last big reverb. And
right.
then the cars themselves, it's like the ride just got really loud and squeaky as time went on. It's like you would hear the motors and like this the wheels grinding and stuff. But that was, I mean, those two things are probably the biggest. And of course, shit was dusty. Sorry,
yeah.
Used a bad word there, but like things got, the sets and stuff weren't dusted like.
How do you go in and dust an Omnisphere, right?
Swiffer.
Like you just can't.
Hey, so here's a question. Now you guys know this stuff too. Did the original, that whole computer system thing underground Epcot that controlled everything, did that control Horizons? I take it.
So what we just found out is that was actually not the case of Epcot. I just listened to a fantastic interview on the Tomorrow Society podcast with actually one of the guys that did a lot of the computer programming, and he actually blew a myth that everything was controlled at Epcot Computer Central the way that it was at DAX in Walt Disney World.
So what was the point of Computer Central? Just for the astuter computer review? And that was...
It's like that whole computer just controlled Early the Pearly. That was it. That's all that
partially did. There were some systems for Communicore that were housed in there. The overall property, like fire control system and power management stuff, was monitorable from in there. But the rides themselves, the computer systems that ran the rides, were actually located in each one of the pavilions. It wasn't centrally located like it was during the Magic Kingdom era.
So speaking of a timeline here, when did it all close? If you want to go back in time, it was January 9th, 1999. So 1999. It permanently closed. The signs weren't removed until the following September. And then it briefly opened for press groups, like for a day or something in September, which was really weird.
They just fired it back up.
Yeah, fired it back up after, 6 months of downtime, 8 months actually. And on July 7th, 2000, the demolition started, and it took only to September to take it down, and Mission Space was started. The interesting thing on the demolition, I'm sure a lot of you have seen photos. If you haven't, we talked about that the building was really built around these two omnispheres, and there was a massive structure in the center that held up the building. And when they took it down, they actually had to bite away with these machines around the center to get to the core. And what was left was this strange tower with the roof hanging from it. It was interesting. So that was quite a demo job, quite a bit to do.
Something that I didn't realize that I saw in the maintenance documents is that the IMAX projectors were actually rented.
No,
they didn't own those, so they had to give them back before they demolished the building.
Just because they're IMAX branded.
Yeah, I think probably IMAX has a thing where they don't actually let you buy the projectors from them. You probably just go into a long-term
lease or
agreement.
Probably get all parts from them, everything. Yeah, it's interesting.
That's funny.
That was funny.
And I know in some of the demolition photos, the really sad part is that you can see some of the set pieces in some of it. Certain things were just not removed. There's pictures of the cars all. There's like maybe 12 of them on a flatbed truck just going down the highway, being taken out. Piles of rubble. There's a couple pictures of rescued film strips and some background images that were saved. And but yeah, some of the close-up shots, they're not for the weak of heart. If,
Where's the car? Has
if
anybody
this
seen
was-
the cars? Anybody have one in their living room somewhere? Or anybody?
There was one for sale not long ago. A Van Eaton auction or something. So there was.
That's my quest for the listeners. If you know of a car sitting in somebody's garage, their rec room, I just want to see I love that stuff when it gets out there. Not as much as the ride being demolished and all that's not worth it, but still, I think that's pretty cool to see that. So if you know of a car,
So here's my bet. So we know that there was one that was sold at Theme Park Connection, and I think that might have been the one that ended up going up for auction later on. So, knowing what we know about the way things are disposed of, somewhere on Disney property is a landfill filled with how many cars were on this attraction? 80 something?
Something like that.
that would take up the whole landfill.
But they don't care. They got 43 square miles. Somewhere.
I mean, you ran past it in the marathon. You run past the dump.
I mean, somewhere is a dump filled with all these chunks of Horizons.
Like the Atari games, the ET.
Yeah, exactly. Someday in the future, we might be able to do the Atari game thing and actually find
There are
all this
184 vehicles.
184, and there's one that we know.
So you don't think that the
100
truckload that Todd's talking about was taken for preservation? It was more taken for trash?
Yes.
Why would they take the cars out and just drive? Why not just demo it with the cars in it?
Well, I mean, you got to get them off of the track first.
Yeah.
I mean, there's probably some things that you need to do just procedurally. It's like, we take the stuff off the track. Like the track could get sold for scrap. So there are probably some things that they could actually...
So you would take set pieces out, but normally what happens is, unless you're preserving them, like the background stuff, the stuff the set pieces sat in, unless you have a plan for them, that all goes in the demolition. That stuff. But any kind of hard... I mean, those were hard, probably fiberglass or... molded plastic or something, injection molded, whatever it is, you don't leave those in the building. I mean, because they don't get destroyed. Like when the building falls down, they're still in complete hunks. And so most of what happens with that debris is that it gets separated into clean fill, which is stuff that can be put into the ground, and then landfill stuff, which is hard objects, things like that, which you would actually pay to bury somewhere, because you can't burn that. Or it could be scrapped. It could have gone to a junkyard. They could have gone to a junkyard where they separate out all the metal and all that, and the plastic pieces literally just get ripped apart. So that's the kind of stuff that happens with that. And demolition's a fascinating business.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah.
I just can't believe out of 184 cars, only one made it out. Something else.
So I just sent you guys a photo. I was looking through some of our demolition photos, and we do have pictures of the Omnimax removed before the demolition, which is pretty cool. So we've got a couple pictures of that.
They look like in an old school projector TV if you take the screen off. That's what it looks like inside.
Yeah.
The 3 color bulbs or whatever.
Oh, well, that would have been that top one would have been the video system that was used for the Choose Your Tomorrow.
Right,
yeah.
Right. And then the other one is the back of the screens that we were talking about. The other interesting thing is that when they did demolish it, the lounge had been closed for a while and had the AT&T, because it was used as a temporary AT&T lounge when Spaceship Earth was being refurbished in 1984. So kind of interesting.
And Horizon
as well.
stuff is in the last week alone on eBay. One of those number puzzles sold for $150. There was a luggage tag.
Oh, the little thing
Yes.
that you would.
Yes.
Oh my gosh, I had one of those years ago in Horizon.
I saw one go for $400 a few years ago.
It's like a 10-cent kids party toy.
It was sealed. There was a luggage tag, I guess, that was given away to clients that sold for $375. And I got none of these. And then there is a guy who must be an engineer, an Imagineer. I think his eBay handle is like Nova City.
Oh yeah, he sells a lot of stuff.
Yes, and he sold it's a barely visible but fairly elaborate piece that is the control panel for the video screen in the undersea city, and that sold for over $5,000. So Horizon stuff really is one of the outside of the big posters, I mean, Horizon stuff goes crazy because there's not that much to buy.
Yeah.
No, it was not a celebrated souvenir type attraction. You didn't have any characters from it until it closed, and they're like, oh wow, we had a cool robot. Let's make a pin for it.
Well, and the Gero poster, that triangular one's always listed at like $500.
Yes.
Yeah. So I think it's time to close up our discussion of Horizons.
Thank God. Now we can move on to Mission Space.
So if you go into Mission Space today, when you have to choose between the orange or the green, there's a mural there, and there's a little tiny Bravo Centauri like space station in that space mural there. And then also if you go into the queue, and now as you recall, it's like they reused set pieces from the Mission to Mars movie that Disney made in there. So there's like a rotating habitat, and in the center of that rotating habitat, they've placed like a Horizons logo in the middle of that. So those are the two places where you can see a little chunk of Horizons still around.
I know we mentioned it in the last episode, but the orange scent in Soarin' 1.0 was a nod to the attraction as well.
Yep. Yes, and the Smellitzer from Horizons is now in Spaceship Earth.
Yes,
and it's squirting out the Rome burning smell, as we found out when we got to take our tour.
That's right. The other one broke. Well, got another one.
big hole in the wall.
Bring the parts in. Well, I appreciate all you guys for doing the research here and bringing this to probably what's going to amount to nearly 6 to 7 hours of coverage for our listeners.
Not enough.
Yeah. Ted, you can start your own The Horizons podcast. Each episode can be a single scene.
We will. So one of the things I have to say is we now have a very good list of names of people who worked on this, and we are in the process of finding these folks, and we're going to be doing one-on-one interviews with them. I have one that I hope to line up in the next week or so that I think you guys will find very fascinating. So, in the future, when we do our mini episodes, it's like, we're going to actually have like a lot of firsthand knowledge that we'll be able to pass on to you, from these people. And, I think that's just going to be great. So the Horizon story does not end tonight. It continues. Like, it's all on the horizon still. It's never.
That's right. That's right.
I'm really okay with it. I'm just joshing you guys.
And I know how you had mentioned that last month, and we just couldn't get the timing to get all these people in and also discuss the things that we wanted to do here in part 3, The Legacy. So
it's really great how the folks who worked on this, who are now retired, are starting to appear and starting to share stories and their time. So while we have the opportunity, before people like George McGinnis, who died, pretty recently, it's like before everyone is gone, it's like we're going to try to get as many stories from these people as we can.
And I will add one more thing. So thank you very much to all of you for listening. I just want to add this in, an interesting statistic. Our podcast listener family has been growing, quite rapidly actually over the past year or so. But here's what's interesting is that I ran the statistics for the last year. We produce these about monthly. So there's about 12 episodes out there. In the past year, dating all the way back to last June, and we're now in July here, already Horizons Part 1, the prologue, and Horizons Part 2, the promise, is number 1 and 2 for the past year. So it's eclipsed in just a month and a half of release, episode 40, 38 or whatever it is through 50 in just 1 year, in just a month and a half.
Well, I think that's a testament, if not to us, as much as it is to the attraction of Horizons and how special it was.
To give you an idea, so the number 1 ever is Epcot Center One Little Spark, and I think that's because of the title that people think we're talking about Journey into Imagination. And then they start it and realize, wait a minute, no, this is about the construction. I don't want to. Right behind it is episode 3, Fort Wilderness, and then it goes into different ones from there. So just to give you an idea, there's about 16,000 downloads of that Epcot One Little Spark over, and that was produced a number of years ago, and the Horizons episodes already each have over 7,200 listens in a month and a half. So something that took 3 years to get to 16,000, we've accomplished. One of them's accomplished since May 1st, and the other one's done it in actually under 30 days. Has gotten to over 7,000 listens. We struck a chord with all of you out there. We appreciate you listening. And how I know you did do a couple little pieces of new artwork out there on our site, and I think you've got a couple more Horizons ideas coming.
Oh yes, we have a lot of merchandise coming. There are so many references and things that we can use. So just hold on here.
Yep.
The floodgates are about to open.
Exactly.
Maybe there'll be too much Horizons merchandise. I don't know, but hopefully there's going to be something for everybody.
Well, I think according to Ted, if you can't have too much podcast time of Horizons, then you can't have too much merchandise. So
that's true.
So you've got a couple out there, right? You've got you added 2 this month.
That's right. We did actually the piece that Ted was talking about. The logo for the television system.
Yep.
It's like I redrew that, so you have that one is available.
And it's called what is it? The Active Voice Teleview.
Yeah. That's what they use in the futures.
That's right.
And then what was the second one?
You did the GE name tag shirt, so you can wear.
Oh,
it has
that's right.
The oval name tag over the left breast pocket, and you can take a Sharpie or whatever and write in your own name to be. That's when the cast members had a GE tag.
That's right. So that in the VIP lounge, that was the tag that the cast members wore. And yes, there's a variety of stuff coming on. I guarantee I think you'll like it once I get it done.
And we'll post a big one up there. And you also did some great Camera Center and Gateway Gift logos too that are out there.
Yeah. So. With the news of those going away.
Yep.
Or at least one of them going away. It was time to end. I noticed after I got it done that there were a couple other ones out there on the internet. So, I say shop around, find the ones you like. It's like, if you don't buy mine, I'm not going to be disappointed, but I will tell you that, typographically it's as accurate as we're going to be able to get it. And then also I used the colors as they were in 1982 instead of the colors as they are now, after having been faded out over the course of time.
Pre-sun.
Yes, exactly.
If they had only been coated in SPF 50, we would have known. Okay. So. With that, thank you to everybody for listening. Give us a shout out on iTunes if you can, and a review. Appreciate it. If you have any questions or comments, send them to podcast@retrodwdw.com. Ted, thank you very much again for sitting in tonight. I hope you enjoyed it.
I loved it. Thank you so much for having me.
Oh, you're very welcome, and we appreciate your support that you've given us over the years, and all the different anecdotal information you've been able to provide to these episodes. So much appreciated. So again, thanks to all of our listeners out there. And with that, we'll see you next month. Brian, take us out.
Follow the Lake Buena Vista Historical Society on Twitter and Instagram @LBVHistory and on the web at lbvhistory.org. Follow Todd McCartney and Retro WDW on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook @RetroWDW. For all things Retro Disney World, including exclusive merchandise, visit us on the web at retrowdw.com. On Twitter, follow our web designer, Jason Bartell of Deepwater Studios @JasonDWS. Our announcer, Andre Gardner @AndreGardner. And follow our hosts, Hal Bowers, on Twitter and Instagram @GoAwayGreen, and on the web at kingdomofmemories.com. For JT Kujar on Twitter @LS1JT, on YouTube at Rubber City Motoring, and on the web at rubbercitymotoring.com. And you can find me on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram @Brian P. Miles. Retro Disney World is the monthly podcast of the Lake Buena Vista Historical Society, a non-profit, non-partisan, tax-exempt 501c3 organization, and is not affiliated in any way with the Walt Disney Corporation or any of its subsidiary or affiliated entities.